42 years old, but I got married when I was 39 and started having my babies then. So I'm definitely an older mom. And so my transition, I was really looking towards, starting to have my babies and raising them. And my transition, I think, was a little easier because I was retiring and I knew that I could rely on my military retirement, which is a definite benefit and all the health care that offers also. And plus my spouse, he had a great job. And so I really felt like my transition was pretty easy. And I'm very fortunate in that. And I also decided that I would only work part-time for the first like 10 years. And as my kids were growing up, and I just recently went back to work full time.
So, hi, this is Sarah Maple. So I would say, like a lot of veterans, I had a terrible transition for a number of reasons. I think one of which is a common issue, is we don't really know what the next part of the story is, since we're talking about storytelling. Like, we really understand the military aspect and we have learned how to tell that and what that really means, but we haven't really thought through what we're supposed to be doing and what the next part of the story is when we leave. And we don't spend a lot of time exploring that and figuring out what that is. And so we get kind of lost. We have all these resources to tell us how to write a resume, but we don't really know what we're writing it for. We don't know what we want to be doing or which direction we want to go in. And so that is certainly one aspect. The other aspect, I think, I left and I did become a military spouse for a little while as well. And a major loss of my identity in that. I mean, on one day I'm leaving and the gate guard is saluting me and calling me ma'am. And the next time I go through the gate as a dependent, I'm getting a sort of condescending look from the same gate guard as, oh gosh, a dependent, here she comes, right? And so all of that sort of identity that I built for myself disappeared, and I didn't really have anything to replace it with. And that's sort of, I think, something that a lot of veterans deal with when they transition, and where storytelling really, really comes into play.
Thank
I
you
want to
so
make
much.
another comment about the storytelling piece. I think that's so important for veterans to tell their story. I think a lot of times when you leave the military and you go to a new job, like a corporate job, it almost feels like your veteran or your military experience doesn't apply anymore. And so in that regard, I think it's so important for us to keep our community of veterans around us too, because a lot of us spent, 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20 years in the military, and it's very much a part of who we are. And so I feel like I make a point of always, saying I'm a veteran. I'm really proud of it. I love it. And, I have my business now, which is separate from my corporate job, but I run Women Veteran Speakers. And that really started from, it's a speakers agency, but it really started from that whole storytelling aspect of encouraging women to speak up and say they're a veteran and be proud of it. And reaching out to the community and letting them know who women veterans are.
You guys hit the nail right on the head there. I think it's so important for us to be able to have the courage to tell our stories so that, more changes can be done in smoothing out the transition for us. I think that, and I personally went through it, but I went through like more struggles, I guess, because the TSP program that we had, I was the only one within my career field that, I was the only one in the class that wanted to be a journalist, and everybody else wanted to be in law enforcement or in other careers. And I really had a struggle with translating my, what I've done in the service into a career in journalism so that employers, know what I've done and the value that, I've had as a Marine. So, I appreciate you guys really sharing your experiences. And for those of you just hopping on the call, thank you for joining us as well. Talking to these lovely ladies, women veterans, on integrating storytelling techniques into their careers and just navigating through life, transitioning out of the military and things like that. And so the next conversation that I'd like to have would be about podcasting. And Amanda Huffman and Carrie um, Jeter, is that your last name, Jeter? Okay, like Derek Jeter. Awesome. So I want to talk to you ladies about podcasting and, how did you learn, or how did it all start for you guys to, navigate and learn how to do it?
I can go first. My journey to podcasting actually started when I started blogging. I have a blog called Airman to Mom, and I started that when I transitioned out of the military and I was losing my sense of self and I was trying to figure out where I was going to go. And it was through hearing the stories of other women that an idea for a podcast came about. And I just started by interviewing women, and I think a lot of people in the military get this, like, I just do it one step at a time. And then when I come to a brick wall, I'm like, all right, where do we go from here? And so I just started by interviewing people, and then I learned how to edit, and then I learned how to upload, and I just did it one step at a time. And the stories of military women, that's the easy part. You just have to find women who want to share their stories, and then the podcast comes together really easy.
Yeah, and my journey began looking for podcasts myself because I loved podcasts in other genres or other things that I was doing, and I commuted, so podcasting was a huge part of that for my story. But when I realized after 3 years of getting out that I wasn't hearing stories about women who were like me, and they're with our podcast, the Freedom Sisters podcast, our original one, we're starting to think about diversifying and doing another one, but our original one is all about the soulful stories. So I really felt like there was this gap in services for the spiritual healing of women veterans on the transitional side. And so that was really what catapulted me into doing it. If it wasn't out there, just like any other problem, can we solve this problem and start talking about this with other women? And so I shared my story first, and then I just guide other women in their story who are now veterans. Some of them are still serving, but that is kind of how I started podcasting. And just like Amanda, each step of the way, learning the next skill set so you could be successful at the actual trade.
And, tell me about the skills that you've learned as you've, shared stories on your podcast, like interviewing techniques, maybe that you'd like to share with the group. Ways that you research, telling women veterans, stories. Like, do you use one social media platform more than the other? Do you, conduct surveys? I'd love to know about your process in, before the podcast gets made and post production.
Yeah, so when I first started interviewing people, I did a lot more research and I would try and guess what questions I would come up with. And based on, I have everyone fill out a form before they are on the podcast. And so that gives me their branch, when they served, and anything specific that they want to focus on. And so using that information, I was able to draft up questions. But I always start with, why did you decide to join the military? And then we go through their career, and then based on things that I find interesting, that's where the story goes. And then I always end with, what advice would you give to young women who are considering military service? And so the more I've done it, I have over 125 podcast episodes on the podcast. So it's, the more you do it, the easier it gets. But when I first started, it was really scary, and I had all these questions, and now I have my standard questions that I have to go to, and then the information that they give me in the pre-interview, and I have this form I fill out, and then I just do it over and over and over and learn how to do it.
Yeah, and for me, I came with the skill set of interviewing and journalism because I was a public affairs officer for so long of my career, but it was still nerve-wracking because this is somebody's personal story that they're sharing. And so I did a deep dive in researching my subject before they came on the podcast, and then was very scripted at the beginning. And what I have realized, the better way to do things, as I have learned and gone through, now I don't have 125. I think I'm just shy of 100 at this point. But what I have learned is like, just to be their guide, just to, have them remember a point in their life and then let them continue the story and just give them little prompts. And so that's what I have done on our podcast. I still do a little bit of research just so I am well equipped and can answer questions if they do get stuck. But then post-production, and then and the process of production, actually, we'll answer your question kind of in order. I have learned that editing is time consuming. And so I have found a couple of tools that help the editing process, because I still do all of my editing myself. And I don't no longer go the old fashioned way, listening to the audio and cutting bits of the audio. I found an app that works where it converts it, it transcribes it for me. So it's 2-in-1. And then I can edit that audio through a word processing, which I prefer, because then I could visually see what I'm doing and not just hear. And then, I do have a disability. I don't hear very well. And so that also helps eliminate the accessibility for me as well. And then post-production, I love Instagram. I live on Instagram for sharing the stories and repurposing content for most of my podcast, but I go to LinkedIn primarily to connect with other people to get them on the podcast or in our magazine. And so that's what I do for the Freedom Sisters podcast.
Awesome. Thanks, ladies, for sharing that. And just to kind of add to that, so before I conduct interviews, most of the time I actually tell veterans that I'm a veteran myself. And, to establish that kind of trust, because I know that some vets are hesitant in being on camera and sharing something so personal and being vulnerable. So I guess I established myself as someone who served before we get our interview going, because it creates kind of that bond first. That sense of, okay, I've been in your shoes, or in similar circumstances. I've served too. And so I understand, to a certain extent on, we may be from different branches and have different MOSs, but we came from the same place and we had similar struggles, and I'm here to hear your story. And I think that it's the same circumstance with you, Carrie and Amanda, in building that trust with your interviewees. So thank you also for sharing that with us. And again, for those of you just joining in, thank you for hearing us out and joining us on this lovely Wednesday afternoon. And we're going to be talking about multimedia. And I would love to ask Donna and Cheryl some questions. Donna, what challenges did you face, I guess, in learning multimedia journalism? And is there anything specific that you're working on right now?
So challenges that I faced I sold my first professional photo, when I was still in high school to a news agency. So the challenge for me as a photojournalist, and I think for many of storytellers and many journalists, though we are in people's faces, many of us are kind of shy and don't necessarily want to talk to people. And this gets us out of, it takes us out to a different place to be able to speak to somebody, even though it's not comfortable for us. So there's my challenge, that I'm not that kind of in your face type of person all the time when I'm not a journalist. But when I am a journalist, I have to be. Challenges for me, I went to school to become a journalist before I went into the Navy. I dropped out of Boston University and I enlisted in the Navy a year and a half in. So I hadn't finished my degree, but I knew from age 7 that I wanted to be either a journalist or a veterinarian. And because of my math abilities, it was clearly I would become a journalist and not a veterinarian. So yeah, challenges were once I got out of actually while I was still in the military, I didn't want to. They found out about my background. They said, why don't we start this newspaper here at my command? My public affairs officer said, I want to start this. I want you to help me. The commanding officer of the command said, I want this newspaper to get people to travel. And so I started becoming a journalist already in the military before I had finished my degree. Get out of the military, my Montgomery GI Bill paid for it, got my degree, started freelancing, and the rest is history. Multimedia in particular, though, I'm using audio, I'm using video, I'm using still photos, and I'm putting it all together. So challenges there were learning curves with all those software programs that I had to use or that I had to afford. There's a lot of free software out there, though, that you can get to do some of this stuff. And then learning it. There's learning challenges with all those softwares. For as long as I've been a photographer, I am readily admitting to all of you that I have never used Photoshop, that I still rely on free software that I found was fabulous. And I'm not going to stop using it until somebody forces me off of it and makes me learn Photoshop. So I can be a little, yeah, that's frustrating. Did that answer the question?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Right.
It's fascinating to, hear your journey through, learning about journalism and the struggles in, keeping up with technology nowadays. Because I understand completely. Like, I learned in college that, you had to wear multiple hats in this industry in order to, be versatile. And of course, we've kind of learned that in the military service, where you kind of adapt and overcome. You have to work sometimes longer than expected, and shift hours, and it definitely teaches you a lot of discipline, journalism.
It did. And I think, yeah, the military also taught me to not just do what my job was, to do as much as I could possibly do and learn as many things as I could possibly learn in it. So yeah, I was taking classes in the military also.
I have Cheryl on the phone so she can participate. She wasn't able to get on, but she can hear us now and communicate.
Oh, okay. Awesome. Thank you so much, Carrie, for that. Hi, Cheryl. Thank you for joining us. And I apologize for the technical difficulties that you've been experiencing.
Yeah, I do not understand what I'm doing wrong, but I swear I must have entered that code 100 times since I started to get into the meeting. But anyway, I'm at least on audio.
Okay, wonderful. So I'm going to ask you a question now. So I would love to know how you got involved in, TV production, and, you're telling women veterans stories on your platform. So can you tell us about that?
Sure. Excuse me. Yes, I would love to. I produce Helping Veterans TV as a community educational access series. I produce it at the Mid-Penn Media Center in Palo Alto. And I am 73 years old, but my career was working for the state of California, and I retired in 2004. But when I was in the position of working for the Employment Development Department Job Service, I was a vet rep. And in that capacity, I was in San Mateo County, which is a huge county. And with my disabled veteran staff and myself, between all of us, we could not get to all the places where we were trying to provide services for veterans. So long story short, one of my DBOPs and I, we went over and pitched this concept to get veterans to come into our office for services. So that was the original intent. But what happened last year, because of the COVID, and I could not film in the studio anymore, and I could not go on location anywhere because of the COVID-19 restrictions, I didn't know how I was going to keep filming. So long story short, I got on a video conference call. I do almost one a day. But when I did the first one, and as soon as that first conference call was over, I said, there's the solution to my problem. Now I can do interviews virtually because I don't do this by myself. I have a partner that helps me complete the final edits using Premiere Pro. So I have been doing community educational access for a total of 25 years. And I've gone through several iterations of it. And now, because of the pandemic, I was forced to become an independent filmmaker. And now that I am an independent filmmaker, I no longer have to require and depend on the studio to film and do my interviews. Did you hear all that?
We did. You're muted, baby.
So, in the last few years, I have 3 phases of VHV TV. The first 20 years was like an apprenticeship. But in the last 5 years, when the studio converted from standard digital to high definition, they took 9 months off. I did not know if I was going to keep the series going. But when they did reopen in a brand new state-of-the-art studio comparable to anything in Hollywood, 3 camera setup and all that, everything. I was contacted by InPower, which was an IT training nonprofit at the College of San Mateo, and they wanted to outreach to veteran students on campus to offer them classes so they could get jobs in technology. I was a job service vet rep, so my number one goal was always to provide jobs and services for veterans when I worked for the EDD. But now in filming, and because of the pandemic, everything shifted. It was either stop doing it altogether or figure out a way to do it. So basically, it was adapt or not do it at all. And I can't do it because this is my legacy. This is my dream. I'm trying to figure out how to make it all work and put all the pieces together. And I work with a lot of people that are helping me do that in one way or another.
Thank you for sharing, Cheryl. And I just wanted to confirm, you said you're how old are you?
Yes, you heard that right. 73, she said.
I just want to clap and you've been doing this for 25 years.
For the community educational access TV show, Veterans Helping Veterans TV.
Right.
Yes. And I will tell you, a great deal of the time, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I just don't.
That's incredible. I just think that it's astounding because, Donna and I were talking about the challenges and, keeping up with technology and, for older vets, just trying to learn how to, to cut something or, to do interviews or just to work with equipment. That's a difficult process, and it's not easy. And but you've had the patience and the determination to be able to run, your educational services. So I just think that it's an incredible thing for you to, be with us and just share that.
Well, thank you. But you also touch on something, keeping up with the technology that is really hard to do. And what I lack in is the proper management of my social media and marketing, because I'm drowning in that stuff and I suck at it. And I can't keep up with it because it's just 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If you let it overrun your life, and it's overrunning my life. And so basically I ignore it because I can't keep up with it. So technology, yes, I love the video. I love the editing. When I get a video and I edit it down and the conversation comes out and it's an authentic conversation, there's nothing more powerful in telling a woman veteran story. And coincidentally, this was not planned, but it's just the way it happened. we've done 10 virtual interviews. They're all with women veterans who are incredible advocates, each in their own community, each in their own right, trying to make a difference for all veterans, but especially women veterans. Those are the stories we're telling. So yeah, and I learned all this by going through, I do have some degrees, but really where I learned the basics of filmmaking was the Veterans Make Movies program, the LACMA, LA County Museum of Art. For 3 years, they offered 4 times a year courses on teaching veterans within the LA, Southern California area, the basics of making movies using a Mac and an iMovie, and that's the way I do it.
Awesome, and thank you so much.
I just wanted to
Yes.
add something else, because you had asked in part of what you were questioning us, bias in storytelling. Does our veteran status make us biased in telling stories of veterans or active duty? And I think it's a very important question. And I think we need to know as storytellers, or especially as journalists, when something that can make us biased, we can say, step away from it, and we can ask someone else to tell the story. I am located in Annapolis, Maryland, and right up the road from me is the National Security Agency, Fort Meade, and I'm right next to the Naval Academy. I often tell stories involving the military and veterans. I can leave my bias at the door when telling those stories. But I know also, if anyone were to look up Veterans Day on Google and look at the images, you will not see images of female veterans. And I will do everything I can to change that picture through my camera, or through my video camera, or through my microphone. I will focus on female veterans quite often. Is that bias? Maybe, but female veterans do need focused on, need to be part of the story, and I am a storyteller and I can do that. Do I tell their stories without bias? Yes, I do. Are there other stories that I can't tell with, that I know to step away from? Yeah, I used to write for the Capital Gazette. For those of you that are not familiar with the Capital Gazette, I don't currently write for it, but on June 28th, 2018, a gunman walked through the door and killed 5 people, several of them my former coworkers. I still can't report on that story because I'm not unbiased. So I hope that answered that question.
Wow. And I think that statement, resonates with a lot of women veterans. Like, we just want to be represented and, just to be visible. And I couldn't agree with you more. Like, in journalism, you maintain neutrality, and, you leave all the biasness out the door. And you can disassociate yourself from that and still be a veteran and still tell stories on the military beat. It's just, so like for example, the January 6th Capitol insurrection, we had veterans who were arrested and took part in what happened. And there are journalists telling their stories, who have served as well. And it's important. Like, I see that as a strength, not a weakness, not a sign of being biased at all. Like, it's just understanding, the simple things like, rank structure, deployments, decorated. If the veteran that was, arrested or, you know, um, was charged, like, history about the veteran.
Yep.
I think that veterans in journalism can understand and break down within stories for viewers. And I think that it was so important, Donna, for you to share that.
Hey, Babee, can I make a comment about that?
Yes.
So that's really why I started Women Veteran Speakers, and also a book I had published in 2012 called Military Fly Moms, because I really felt like the media was portraying women veterans in such a way that I didn't think was the whole story. And I think that it's so important that we tell our story. We don't let other people tell our story because we know it, and that's why, and I wouldn't say I'm biased in my viewpoints or running my business. I say it's a niche. Like my business is a niche for women veterans, and I'm happy to do it because, you know, that's really kind of my MO in life, is highlighting women veterans, because I feel like a lot of times people in middle America don't know who we are, you know, and I know throughout my career, you know, they would say, well, you know, they didn't really understand who women veterans were, women active duty were. And I would always say it could be your mom, your sister, your niece, your neighbor. And I just think it's really important that we are actively involved in telling our stories.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think, you know, it's a combination, like, I think of both, you know, us telling our stories to, you know, making sure that, um, you know, media organizations, news outlets are getting the information correctly, and telling our stories, right. And also telling our own personal journeys through it. And, you know, I do a combination of both. I speak on forums about my struggles getting into journalism. And then the other half of me is my actual career, telling stories, for a living. And you know, it's the best of both worlds, to be honest. And um thank you also, Linda, for adding to that, um into that conversation. And I'd like to, for those new who are joining, thank you, by the way, for, you know, being a part of this conversation. We really do appreciate it here at MVJ, and it's amazing to learn about my guests today. So I wanted to talk to Maureen and GI, Michelle GI Gardner, and I wanted to talk about, um, examples of serving the community as a woman veteran and military spouse. And I want to know, you know, what you guys do within your jobs to, you know, as you know, a woman veteran, you know, and I want to know, like, what you do within your leadership roles.
Do you want to go first, GI, or would you
Oh,
like?
no, please.
Okay. I never want to be the first to speak. It's this is something I've worked hard to do since coming out of the military, because you speak first to get smoked, right?
Oh, no.
You know, my journey into advocacy and my journey into storytelling came because I was a family member first. I actually didn't identify as a woman veteran for almost 12 years. I left the military, and much like, I think it was Linda who talked, or Sarah talked about, take off their hat, they get saluted. I never got saluted. I was only a sergeant. But the next day I stopped mattering to the military, and that hurt. And that was a tough transition. But I did know how to use my voice because I was a veteran. And so I have 3 kids with autism, and by golly, I made sure that they had everything that they needed for success. And that often meant telling our story as a family in the community. So anywhere that we've lived, in all of our millions of PCSs that we've done, there is most likely a community newspaper during World Autism Day featuring our family, because we understand that by sharing our stories, we open up sometimes uncomfortable conversations and help other people identify and not feel so alone. And it was through advocacy at things like PTA meetings and town hall and TRICARE representatives that I understood and learned the skills for advocacy. I had no idea though what national advocacy was. And so when I finally embraced my identity as a veteran and went back to school and got a degree, I got a taste of what advocacy and storytelling was through the High Ground Veteran Advocacy Fellowship. And it was like crack. I loved it. The opportunity to speak to people on Capitol Hill about what is going on, and having the lens of being both a veteran and a military spouse gives me a really unique perspective and story, because I'm using both systems and seeing how the two do and don't operate. Storytelling, though, did not come to me naturally. Being in the military, I'm a meat and potatoes kind of person. So it's still something I work with, especially as we move into like billable hour type stuff, which I'm not that bougie yet, but at some point I hope to. I will take an hour conversation and put it in 2 minutes. And so I've had to relearn the art of conversation. And so that for me, the vessel or the vehicle for that was the Armed Services Arts Partnership. And She's not on the call now, but I have to give a shout out to my friend Tammy Bartlett, because I had come home after giving a speech at school and I was so excited to share it with her. And she's like, Maureen, I love you so much, but oh my gosh, you're so boring. And I didn't realize at the time that from raising 3 kids on the spectrum and having a husband who came back with Afghanistan with some issues, that I had developed this like soft, soothing voice that really didn't portray well in public speaking or on Capitol Hill. And so I went through the storytelling course and learned about how to deliver a story in a way that was vulnerable so that people could connect with me, but also in a way that allowed me to tell the story from my perspective and my angle and protect the sensitive parts within me. So I wasn't laying it all out there, but I was sharing what I needed to share in a way that could allow someone who hadn't served in the military to connect with what I was talking about. And so that served me well as I've advocated for military family things such as, we were one of those families that got stop moves. So the New York Times featured our family and another family about the struggles that we had paying for a home in California, as well as a home in Virginia, both very expensive places to live. And recently in an article by Patricia Keim talking about how there has been zero communication with military families when it comes to the COVID vaccine and kind of raising the awareness of that fact. And then on the veteran side, I work for Paralyzed Veterans of America and use not only my stories, but the stories of other men and women who served in helping lawmakers understand why we're asking for something that potentially is going to cost billions of dollars. But if we can connect with them through storytelling, at least they're listening and they're hearing what's being said. So I'll pass it off to you, GI.
Thanks. Wow. I need you to put that storytelling course in the chat. I tell people, GI it's a noun, it's a verb, it's an adjective. And if you worked for me in the Air Force, it might have even been a cuss word. So I was blessed to have married into a brand, I'll put it that way. But I have never been without an ID card. And I think I learned my voice early because my background is very unique. In that my father was one of the first Black Army Corps of Engineer officers. So my entire youth, all the way up through college, I was the only Black officer's kid on my post. So the Blacks didn't like me because I was an officer's kid, and the whites didn't like me because I was Black. So I was in this no man's zone. So I learned to speak up and love myself at a very early age. So when you see that confidence, that's not fake, that's survivability. And add to that my mother believed in follow her man, and I went to 17 different schools. So every place I went, I had to readjust, get to know, I have a special place in my heart for military spouses because my mother was the 1973 Army Wife of the Year. She's always been a community advocate. And so I grew up in a household where speaking up and serving was what we did. And so having said that, when I always said, I couldn't make general because there weren't any stars in my career field. So I always said, I'm a star in my own eyes. But I made a commitment that when I made colonel, I would speak up, pull up, and right wrong. And so that's kind of what I have carried that into this position that I'm in. And I'm telling you, what people don't know is God gave me this. That's why you see the passion. This was not in existence. This was not planned by VA. Nobody gave it to VA. It came about because of numbers. And VA has struggled to meet its woman-owned small business goal since 2005. So real quickly, the reason is because of the Veteran First law. VA is the only federal agency who must give a portion of its contracts to veterans. Well, you can't say you're not doing well in women, stop doing, contracts with veterans. So therein lies the need to match women and veteran. But as I begin to look at the numbers, here's the issue. Women are fastest growing demographic for VA. 18,000 are leaving every year, but yet we are focused on health, not wealth. If we teach women veterans to have their own business, and it doesn't have to be a $2 billion, doesn't have to be a $2 million, it can be a $200 million business. Employment, homelessness, health, many of those things will take care of itself. And therein lie reduce the burden, it's not a burden, reduce the costs of serving veterans in the health arena. I mean, VA spending millions, doing entire women's clinics because of many of the issues they experienced in the military. So I see myself as a evangelist, and you can probably tell that by my passion. I see myself as an advocate, and I see myself as a person who can make a difference and leave a legacy for women veterans, and just give permission. And that's what I've learned. Many of us on, those of you who are on the panel, when we are excellent, when we're doing what we're doing, we're giving others permission to say, I can do that too. I can do my own version of that, because community, and Amanda was amazing on last Friday. I hosted her on my Clubhouse cast last Friday, but we heard stories of maybe 10 or 15 different veterans in addition to hers. But what we heard was community gave us a sense of that we were okay, and we could press on, we could move forward, we could push through. And so that's what I try to do. And oh, by the way, I educate even those within the VA. Go, I didn't know those numbers were that. Now they can tell you how many veteran women are unemployed, homeless, suicide, but there's not a focus on the wealth. And that is why my focus is very narrow. People will say, oh, can you do this? And I said, no, if it's not woman, veteran, business, or leadership, that's not me. I'm very niched, very focused, because I want women to know that they have options. They don't have to go from a military system to a government system or to a corporate system. Create your own. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that, GI. I think that's very empowering, and just to know that you're supporting these women veterans' dreams in rising as business leaders. I think that's so important. We've seen in the media a lot of women, taking charge in various positions, and we have a vice president now who is a woman of color. We're making strides to making our voices heard and to make ourselves visible. And we're in a generation now where diversity and representation matter. And
yes,
and to know that each of you contribute in some way to get there, to increase diversity and awareness to women doing excellent things in the world. Like, I think that's a wonderful inspirational thing.
Well, and I just want to say, and I probably said enough, but I can't leave without saying that we have the skills, we have the power, and it's just about utilizing that and knowing not that there is a place, but that we can create a place. We don't need permission to come to the table. Create our own table. Let's just, it's like, and don't try to be everything to everybody. And, I tell business owners, if you don't remember anything else, niche down. Just like I only do women, veteran, business, and leadership, do that. You don't need the whole pie. This is about having a sniper focus on the group you're trying to serve, whether it's nonprofit or business or whatever, advocacy, because then you can make a greater impact. And so, we have the power, we have the skills. That we learned it in the military, we learned it through hard knocks. And my mission is to open doors, and that's what I do. So knock on doors of big companies, small companies, government agencies, to say, let these women in. That's what I see my purpose is.
Thanks for adding to that as well. And I know that we have maybe 10 minutes left of the discussion. So I just want to make sure that, we cover as much as we can within these last 10 minutes. And I also wanted to I guess, kind of specify that, you know, I normally don't discuss any, political views as a journalist, because it's important to maintain neutral. And when I found out that, we are having our first female vice president, like, I didn't look at it as, a political thing. I looked at it as, a representation kind of moment. It's a impactful, significant moment in history where, we've had primarily, white vice presidents throughout, time. And just to know the progress that we've made, acknowledging, the leaders that, are emerging, the women, female leaders that are emerging right now. It's just, it just shows how far we've come as a society, and respecting women's backgrounds and skills, and knowing the value that they bring to everywhere, to the workforce, to the military, to different aspects of things. So I just wanted to clarify that for those tuning in right now. And I guess, speaking on the topic of Women's History Month, does anybody want to share? I know that we talked briefly about this, Amanda, but you mentioned in your survey that if there's any advice that women vets would like to give to the next generation of women who want to serve. And I'd like to open the floor to see, if anybody would like to share their own advice to, any hopefuls, any female recruits, wanting to, walk on those yellow footprints and wanting to serve our country.
I'll start. I love this question. I do a lot of work with advocacy with military sexual trauma, and the hashtag that's going around, and Amanda Huffman and I have talked about this, but the hashtag no justice, no enlistment. Although I respect my colleagues in that space and understand why they have come to that conclusion, I know statistically minorities get the voice when there's 25% or more of them in the majority. And for women that want to serve, I'm not saying serve and become a victim. I'm saying serve and become a part of the solution to get the change that is required for all of us to serve safely. And so I say absolutely keep doing it. Come in strong, make sure you have a strong mentor. And I'll let the other people say all the extra to that, but we have to get to that 25% in all branches throughout the DoD. So that's what I'll say.
I'll chime in next. I think to a woman who is considering joining the military, I know you said one piece, I'm going to make it two pieces. One is don't let a man or anyone tell you what you can and cannot do. I mean, look at how far we've come with combat arms in the last couple of years. When I joined at MEPS, they tried so hard to talk me into more feminine fields than the field I went into, which is serving as a counterintelligence agent. And so speak up for yourself. Don't be afraid to walk away from the MEPS station if they're not going to give you what you want, because I don't think we always have that conversation. And then I think once you're in, and if this is what you really want to do, find a mentor, find a woman mentor to help with you through the process, just to touch base and check in, like, is this normal? And if it's not, speak up and say something, because I think one of the things I feel very guilty of in my service was tolerating what I probably should have been reporting when it came to more of the harassment and the catcalling and the comments. And so your voice is powerful, your voices are strong, and the more that we speak up and say something, the better off we're going to be at making this change. So for a woman going into the military, if you haven't found your voice, find it and use it often, because it matters.
I agree. I just want to echo one point that you said, and that is, we have to be able to, well, not only speak up, but advocate for ourselves and go into non-traditional women areas, because that is why it is so hard for every corporate business, even the government, to find women veterans in business in the areas they spend: construction, IT, pharmaceuticals, manufacturing, logistics. There's a deficiency because when we were not in those areas. We're in HR, training, and the softer skills. And there's a dime a dozen of us in those areas. So that's very spot on. Good advice.
I'll add something. Get as much education as you can in the military because they pay for it while you're in, and it's expensive when you get out. And don't discount the power of life experiences because college is when you get out will give you credits for those life experiences, major credits for those life experiences. And that matters in no matter what field you're going into, whether it's media or otherwise.
And I'll jump in. I would say, obviously reach out to all of the women who've already been there because we have plenty of advice to pass on. But then once you're in there, take all the risks. Like, take all the opportunities, take all the risks. Like, don't worry about what people are thinking about you or whatever. If it excites you, if you want to do it, like, do it, because there is no other opportunity that is like the military, and you want to get every single drop that you can out of there while you're in there.
Sarah, I'll jump in on that too. I mean, I think I would do it all over again for free, probably. I loved it so much, even all the challenges. I mean, I was in the first group of women that transitioned to a combat squadron, and it was painful in a lot of ways, but I still encourage young women all the time to consider serving in the military because there's so many amazing, wonderful opportunities, educational, and I mean, they just offer so much. I always say that I can never repay the military for everything that it offered me as both a woman and as a citizen of our great country. And then also, you don't have to stay in for a career. I always tell young people, if you want to go in for 4 years, 6 years, you don't have to stay in for a career. And that the women that are in, I want them to really believe when they get out that they are armed with so many amazing skill sets, and that I call it the veteran advantage. That, I mean, where else do you learn? I mean, everyone's a leader really in the military. We're all leaders and followers, at different levels. But where else do you learn that, at 19, 20, 21 years old, but that it really is a veteran advantage. I mean, where else do you learn about mission and, the camaraderie and just all the amazing opportunities?
Well, and as we can see on this call, amazing women too. So like round them up, add them to your LinkedIn, to your network, whatever, get after it.
Absolutely. And, just to wrap it up, because we only have a couple of minutes remaining, I just want to say thank you, ladies, for being on this forum, this conversation. I think that it's so important, for us to be able to share our experiences as we navigate through life and, like using our military background for the good and, helping change people's lives and, just being a good listener and communicating with others in the veteran community, and we're serving a purpose. We're continuing to do so, and we may not be wearing the uniform anymore, but we're doing community outreach and public service in some capacity. So again, if you would like to reach out to me or any of these lovely ladies, we'll be posting more information about them on our social media platforms, MVJ social media platforms. So mvj.network is also our website, and feel free to contact us. And I hope you all have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Thank you to all of you too.
Thank you
Thanks,
for having
everyone.
me.
Thank you.
It's
Thank you,
awesome.
everybody.
Loved hearing you all. Great
Y'all are
information.
an inspiration. Thank you.